Good morning, my fellow classmates and Dr. Schultz. My name is Denise Fuller. Biblical principles in the study of history. According to course guidelines, historians must be honest and be objective in their research. I agree with this too. My research is going to be looking into how Puritans influence, particularly Puritan men, looked with a negative attitude on Puritan women and women in general. I will be doing a 15-slide presentation on PowerPoint. The title of the PowerPoint is How the Influence of the Puritans Caused the Outcomes of the Salem Witch Trials. Research methodology. My research methodology will include looking through books such as this that's on Jerry Falwell's library, primary sources, and articles online through the Jerry Falwell library. My thesis is that the Puritans and their negative attitudes towards the Puritan women in the society and their negative attitudes had a great deal of impact on the decisions of the men, whether it was the judges or ministers. Such men as Reverend Samuel Parris and the Judge Samuel Sewall. The latter, Judge Sewall, asked for forgiveness in front of his home church and also admitted that he and the other judges were wrong. My slide starts with where these negative attitudes came from. They came from Europe, with Pope Innocent publishing his work where he stated that witches were real. At this time, the Roman Catholic Church held a lot of power over the people of Europe. These people believed in Europe anything that the Pope said or wrote. The one who did believe in witches were silenced, or they were tortured and killed, and often were called heretics. I got this article from the Salem Witch Trials across in Puritan New England. To make the situation worse and to back the Pope, there were two German monks named James Springer and Heinrich Kraner, who wrote and published. Their work was called The Hammer of Witches. This text describes what acts were supposed to be destroyed by witches and supposed what witches did to cause disease, and how they destroy crops, and how they describe how they kidnapped innocent children. But the main focus was on hatred of women, in particular older women who were perceived of being feeble in mind and body. This negative effect would come over the Puritans. By the way, the estimates that our victims in Europe was 1 million to 9 million. The estimates will never likely be known. And this ended with rational thinking and the uplifting of science. Puritans were very harsh to many people in their society, especially to women. They preferred the young, rich, and the male. This was likely target was old women who were poor, living on the fringe of society, who had outspoken views about anything, were likely targets to become witches, especially if something suspicious had occurred and the neighbors were watching, and they reported to the colonial officials. I have two examples, Sarah Good and Margaret Scott. Sarah Good, she felt the negative attitude of a so-called witch. She was destitute because of her financial problems that occurred during her two marriages. She was 20 years old, and she looked like she was 70 because of her harsh life. Also, because of her husband's suicide, she was looked down upon by the society. She told her neighbors that she had been talked about, and they ran to and turned her into colonial authority. To make story short, she was condemned and sent out to Gallows Hill, and this minister called Nicholas Meyer taunted her. She told him that she was not a witch, no more than he was a warlock, and told her if they killed her, that God will make you drink blood. Ironically, 25 years later, her prediction come true. Nicholas Meyer choked on his own blood. And the next one, the next article I will take is my primary source, history.org. This lady was condemned because she begged, and her chief accuser was a man by Captain Daniel Wilcox. She's one of the last victims of the Salem witch trials. And following Judge Seawald's apology, 5 years later after Salem witch trials were not going too well, they had Indian raids and the sick and death of Judge Seawald's children. Judge Seawald decided to ask in the part he played forgiveness in the Salem witch trials. He walked into his church and handed a letter. Through this letter, he apologized openly because it helped appease God of his guilt. And I got this from Judge Seawald's apology. Thank you.